The outer reef hung above Varedo's 9 like a rusted crown, miles of welded metal, flickering neon, and drifting exhaust. The station groaned as ships latched onto docking rings, their engines rattling the thin air. Nothing about the place ever stood still. Merchants yelled, plasma coils hummed, and mercenary banners snapped above every alley. The air smelled of machine oil, alien spices, and desperation. Commander Rian Holt walked through the crowded concourse with unsteady steps, his shoulders slouched, his gaze drifting. To anyone watching, he looked like another wanderer who'd drowned his problems in cheap liquor. He clutched a dented tin mug, letting it sway with each step. The mug smelled faintly of barley, but only because he'd rubbed the rim across discarded foam earlier. It held nothing now, his drink had been water from a public dispenser. A man pretending to be drunk learned small tricks. He slipped into the Black Lantern Inn without meeting anyone's eyes. The door hissed shut behind him, muffling station noise and replacing it with a low drone of voices, glasses clinking, and a growling heat from the battered furnace at the back. Lanterns hung from the beams, small glass domes filled with burn gas. Their orange glow carved pockets of light through the haze. Shadows pooled between tables, revealing only silhouettes of patrons hunched over drinks. Rian picked a corner seat with his back to the wall and lowered himself slowly, letting the chair creak under his weight. He set the mug down and stared at the wooden surface, letting the world blur around him. This bar was where trouble lived. Every species with a temper problem came here. The station's law enforcement avoided it. A dead man on the floor rarely stayed long enough to grow cold. Perfect cover. He let his hand rest near his belt, though it never touched the concealed shock blade. Appear relaxed. Appear harmless. Appear useless. Those 3 things had kept him alive more times than any weapon. Across the room, a group of Resactor mercenaries claimed 2 long tables. Their armor, dark crimson carapace plates fused to their skin, caught the lantern light and reflected it in streaks of muted red. They towered over smaller species, bearing tusks whenever someone passed too close. The Resactor had earned their reputation the bloody way. They broke contracts, burned colonies, and laughed during both. A violent species with a violent leader. Rian kept his attention lowered, though he tracked them through the reflection on his metal mug. Every few seconds, one of them barked something in their guttural tongue, sending others into wheezing laughter. The bartender, a wiry reptilian with cracked scales, slid behind the counter nervously, pretending to polish glasses. Humans don't usually walk into this part of the reef, he muttered when passing Rian. Rian didn't answer. Staying silent helped sell the act. He lifted the mug, pretended to drink, and let his eyes drift half-lidded. His pulse remained steady. His breathing slow. His mind alert. Then the bar's atmosphere changed. A hush rolled across the room as footsteps heavier than metal boots struck the floor. Patrons stiffened. One of the low lamps flickered as movement brushed past it. Korthak Bloodhide entered without ceremony. He didn't need any. His presence did the work. Taller than the others, his armor pulsed with faint bioluminescent veins, each one glowing a deep crimson. His eyes burned with cold intent, the kind found only in those accustomed to ruling through fear. The mercenaries straightened when he approached, clearing space. Soft worlders, Korthak growled, scanning the room. Always crawling out of holes they don't belong in. Rian kept his head down. A small Triggerly engineer, tiny, insectoid, wearing a patched flight suit, accidentally brushed against a Resactor's elbow while carrying a tray of shots. The sudden quiet made the alien freeze. The tray slipped, clattering loudly. The nearest Resactor snarled. "Watch where you crawl, bug." Sorry sir," the Triggerly stammered, trembling. The Resactor knocked him aside anyway. The engineer crashed into a table, scattering glasses. A ripple of laughter followed. Rian's jaw twitched. Only once. He forced himself to relax again. Not yet. Korthak's gaze slid across the bar. It paused near Rian's table. The commander lowered his eyelids further, allowing the illusion of drunkenness to thicken. Another Resactor nudged his superior. "That one looks ready to pass out." Human. A perfect joke for the evening. Korthak grinned. The expression looked wrong on his face, too many teeth, Not enough humor. He strode toward Rian with loud, deliberate steps. Chairs shifted. Patrons moved out of the way. Rian continued staring at his mug. A shadow swallowed his table. Stand, Korthak ordered. Rian didn't move. I said stand, Softwelder. Rian raised the mug slightly, pretending to struggle with the motion. Before he could bring it to his lips, Korthak slapped it out of his hand. The metal cup skittered across the floor, clattering until it spun to a stop. The mercenaries laughed again, louder this time. Rian's fingers curled. He inhaled once through his nose. Still didn't move. Korthak leaned close enough that Rian could smell the hot, metallic breath between his tusks. Humans. Always pretending to be something. Brave. Important. Relevant. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. But here, you are nothing. Rian let his head sway as if too drunk to process the words. The mercenaries roared with laughter. The bartender vanished behind the counter. The entire bar held its breath. Korthak straightened and banged a fist against the wooden table, cracking it. Look at him. Too scared to even stand. Is this the best your species can do? Rian lifted his gaze for the first time. Not fast. Slow. Controlled. His eyes locked onto Korthak's. The laughter faded one throat at a time. Rian pushed his chair back. The legs scraped across the floorboards with a long, dragging whisper. He rose smoothly, his posture straighter than anyone expected. His shoulders squared. His eyes cleared completely, sharp, sober, calculating. A chill swept across the room. Korthak's smile died. Rian stepped closer until only a breath separated them. If you wanted a fight, he said quietly, you should have waited until I finished my drink. The room froze on that sentence. Mercenaries exchanged nervous looks. Korthak's fingers curled around the hilt of his blade. Rian didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't back away. For the first time that night, the Resactor realized the human had never been drunk. The bar had just made a mistake. And they were about to learn why humans were feared long before they were known. The Black Lantern interrupted the moment Rian spoke. Chairs scraped. Bottles hit the floor. The Resactor mercenaries surged forward, eager for violence. The quiet hum of conversation turned into a scatter of shouts as patrons dove behind tables. Korthak reacted first, swinging a massive arm toward Rian's head. The blow could have shattered a steel panel. Rian dropped his weight instantly, letting the strike whistle past his ear and slam into the wall. Wood splintered. Rian answered with a short, precise punch to Korthak's ribs aimed not for damage but for disruption. The alien flinched, surprised that a human moved with such speed. Two other Resactor lunged. Rian stepped aside, grabbed a stool, and slammed its edge against the first attacker's knee. A crack followed. The alien roared and collapsed. The second extended claws at Rian's throat, but Rian pivoted, guided the arm past him, and rammed his elbow into the creature's jaw. The mercenary spun backward and crashed into a table. The patrons watched, stunned. A few whispered, "Is that a human? How is he moving like that? Who trained him?" Rian ignored the noise. His focus narrowed to foot placement, angles, and timing. A lifetime of training returned without hesitation. Another Resactor charged. Rian grabbed the mug from the floor, fluidly reversed his grip, and slammed it into the attacker's snout. The metal dented, but the alien dropped instantly. The bartender peeked over the counter, jaw slack. "Human's going to get himself killed," someone muttered. Rian heard it but stayed calm. He scanned the exits. 3 doors, all watched by mercenaries. No clean escape yet. Korthak growled, clutching the spot where Rian's punch had landed. "You dare strike me?" Rian wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "If I didn't dare, I'd be dead already." The words hit harder than the blows. Korthak roared, swinging again. Rian dove behind a table, rolled across the floor, and sprang up near the furnace. Heat washed over him. He picked up a glowing iron poker lying beside the hearth. A mercenary rushed him. Rian swung the poker upward. The hot iron connected with a carapace plate, sending steam rising from the burned spot. The alien shrieked, stumbling backward. Rian tossed the poker aside, the tool had served its moment. He didn't like using anything heated, it felt too close to the battlefields he'd sworn to leave behind. Korthak stepped between his wounded warriors. His breath rattled in his chest like a storm in a metal drum. You're skilled, human. But skill won't save you. Rian exhaled slowly. Then you should have brought more friends. The mercenaries circled him. Their heavy footfalls shook the floor. Rian lowered his stance, ready to move again. But a faint alarm chirped from the far end of the bar. A small insectoid figure waved frantically from behind a stack of crates. The Triggerly engineer, the same one who'd been shoved earlier. His antennae twitched violently. Human. Quick. They called reinforcements. Rian cursed under his breath. He didn't like exposing civilians, but the warning gave him what he needed. He kicked a nearby table, flipping it into the advancing mercenaries, and sprinted toward the kitchen door. Korthak roared commands, and heavy boots thundered after him. Rian burst into the kitchen, dodging steaming pots and startled cooks. He vaulted over a counter and shoved through a maintenance hatch. The narrow corridor behind it reeked of coolant vapors and rust. The hatch slammed behind him. He sprinted through the dim passageways, dodging dangling pipes. Footsteps reverberated behind him. Razakta didn't give up easily. As he ran, a voice clicked through the shadows. Quick, in here. The Triggerly engineer again. He squeezed out from a small access shaft and motioned urgently. Rian didn't argue. He ducked inside. The shaft door closed silently. Darkness swallowed them until the Triggerly activated a faint blue glow from his wristband. You're insane, the little alien whispered. They'll chase you through half the station. That's the idea, Rian replied. The Triggerly tilted his head, confused. Why provoke them? You could have stayed silent. Rian leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Some people don't deserve silence. The Triggerly hesitated. Then he reached into a small pouch and handed over a datapad. I was going to share this with someone braver than me. But after what you did, you should have it. Rian's eyes narrowed. What is it? Razakta troop positions. Deployment schedules. There's movement near the diplomatic corridors toward the Terran sector. Rian felt the air still around him. When? Soon. Very soon. The Triggerly lowered his voice. They intend to take hostages. Terrans, specifically. Rian stared at the datapad. The symbols scrolled across the screen: Razakta warfare codes, convoy routes, attacking positions. The Terran diplomatic convoy was arriving within 48 hours. Rian rubbed his temple. If this is real, they're not just starting a fight. They're sending a message. Exactly, the Triggerly whispered. And you just humiliated their war leader. They won't stop now. A distant thud echoed through the shaft, followed by muffled voices. They're checking every room, the Triggerly whispered. Rian pocketed the datapad. I need a way out. The small engineer gestured deeper into the shaft. That direction leads to the recycler ducts. From there you can reach the lower transit rails. Rian nodded. You didn't have to help me. Most wouldn't, the Triggerly said. But humans helped my colony once. During the droughts. You brought water when no one else came. His voice trembled. I don't forget. Rian swallowed a sudden tightness in his throat. Then I owe your people too. Heavy footsteps grew louder. Rian knelt. Stay hidden. Don't follow. The Triggerly nodded again, trembling. Rian moved through the shaft, dropping into a duct that dumped him onto a maintenance walkway. Orange hazard lights blinked along the length of the pathway. Below him, transit cars shot across rails with sharp metallic screeches. He ran across a narrow beam, dropped onto a passing car, and ducked low as it sped beneath an archway. Above him, Razakta search patrols scanned the platforms with red sensor lights. Rian stayed prone until the car approached another platform. He jumped off and rolled behind a support pillar. From the shadows, he watched the mercenaries sweep the area. They were agitated now, barking orders, slamming fists onto consoles. Korthak stood among them, armor glowing with fury. Find the human, he roared. before he reaches anyone who matters. Rian slipped deeper into the station's underbelly, gripping the datapad tightly. His heart pounded not from fear, but from a familiar surge he'd hoped never to feel again. Duty. Responsibility. A call he'd tried to run from. Now he had no choice. The Terran convoy was walking into a trap. If he did nothing, hundreds would die. He slowed his breathing and stepped forward into the darkness. So much for retirement, he muttered. The cargo bay of docking ring 12 pulsed with sharp white lights as loading drones drifted back and forth. A dozen small freighters were tethered to mooring clamps, their hulls flickering with reflected neon from nearby service signs. Rian slipped through the shadows near the maintenance alcoves, keeping his steps soft and deliberate. He used the hum of machinery to mask his movement. The datapad's holoscan floated above his wrist, showing a concise path toward the Razakta warship. The vessel, Bloodgaze, occupied an isolated berth under heavy security. Korthak had chosen a spot with only one walkway in and out, trusting brute intimidation more than sophisticated defense systems. Rian crouched behind a crate stack as a pair of Razakta guards stomped past. Their armor emitted a faint red glow, casting jagged shadows on the deck. Their heavy breath rasped through their helmets like distant thunder. 2 guards. A patrol every minute. A clear view of the boarding ramp. Rian exhaled, steadying himself. He was not here to fight his way through. Infiltration meant slipping through unnoticed, letting the enemy's confidence blind them. When the guard's footfalls faded, he slid toward a service conduit at the bay's edge. The grate opened with a quiet click. He'd already disabled its alarm grid through a manual override earlier. The air inside smelled of coolant and old wiring. He climbed inside, sealed the grate behind him, and followed the conduit upward in a low crawl. His palms scraped against metal rivets. Occasional sparks flickered from frayed wiring, lighting the narrow space for split seconds. At the top, he reached another panel. He pressed a small device against it, a portable microjammer. It hummed softly. When the indicator lit green, he pushed the panel open. His eyes adjusted to a larger docking corridor leading directly to the Bloodgaze underside, an auxiliary maintenance path, rarely monitored because Razakta engineers preferred brute force over subtle repairs. Rian dropped silently to the walkway, landing in a crouch. The ship loomed above him, its hull shaped like overlapping insect plates hardened into metallic armor. Veins of crimson energy pulsed beneath its surface, giving the vessel an unsettling appearance as if it lived rather than operated. He approached the maintenance hatch, removed its panel, and exposed the coupling locks. A few careful adjustments later, the hatch loosened. He slipped inside. The interior corridors carried a low vibration like a distant heartbeat. Crimson lights lined the walls, casting everything in a faint, menacing glow. Rian stayed near the shadows, counting guard rotations and mapping routes from memory. Every step reinforced how much the Razakta relied on intimidation rather than careful security. That arrogance would become their weakness. Deeper in, he reached an engineering junction where energy conduits snaked across the ceiling. A cluster of power nodes pulsed at the center. He knelt, opened a pouch, and removed small metallic spheres, disruptor charges no larger than marbles. He affixed them at precise intervals, each one sinking silently to his wristband. When activated, the charges wouldn't explode, they would rupture energy flow, freezing the ship mid-operation. Enough to disable the vessel long enough for Terran forces to respond. He moved to place another charge when he heard faint breathing. Not Razakta. Something smaller. Softer. Rian drew his shock blade and stepped toward the sound. A narrow containment door stood ajar. He slipped inside, blade low and ready. A cluster of alien prisoners huddled in the dark. Their shackles glimmered faintly under the dim lights. The mix was diverse: 3 insectoid Triggerly, a lanky humanoid with crystalline joints, and 2 reptilian traders. Their eyes widened when they saw him. Fear, hope, and disbelief flickered at once. One Triggerly whispered, "You're not one of them." "No," Rian answered quietly. A reptilian trader edged forward. "Are you here to escape?" Rian glanced at their chains. "Why are they holding you?" "For leverage," the trader replied. "Trade disputes, debts, territorial quarrels. The Resactor collect problems the same way they collect trophies. Rian clenched his jaw. He hated leaving innocents behind, but freeing them now would trigger alarms. Listen, Rian said softly, I'll disable the ship. When systems fall, the locks will release. Stay inside until that happens. Triggerly nodded. We trust you. That simple sentence weighed heavier than any weapon. Rian turned away, forcing himself to maintain focus. Saving lives meant crippling this vessel before it launched its attack. He continued through the corridor, placing disruptors on key structural nodes. He avoided contact as long as he could, but the deeper he went, the more crowded the halls became. Resactor voices echoed down tunnels, low growls mixed with mechanical groans of shifting machinery. He reached a heavy blast door near the central reactor. A control panel glowed beside it, marked with Resactor glyphs. He tapped the interface. Energy readings spilled across the screen. The door slid open with a soft thump. Inside, the reactor pulsed with swirling crimson energy confined in a thick transparent shell. Heat radiated across the room, making the air shimmer. Noise filled the chamber, a layered hum, like engines groaning under stress. Rian attached the final disruptor near a stabilizer conduit. Its light blinked as it synced. Footsteps approached. Rian ducked behind a support beam. 3 Resactor entered, carrying energy spears. Their voices carried clearly. Korthak wants the ship ready within the hour. He'll want to crush the Terrans personally. They deserve it after that humiliation in the bar. Rian's grip tightened around his blade. The mercenaries passed by, unaware of his presence. When the last one exited, he slipped out and moved toward the upper levels. The corridors twisted upward until he reached the command deck. The door was guarded by 2 elite warriors wearing reinforced armor plates with glowing red symbols etched into their chests. He checked his wristband, disruptors synced and ready. 2 minutes until the Resactor prepared for disembarkment. If the ship launched, the convoy's fate was sealed. Rian weighed his options. A frontal attack would alert the entire deck. Silence was the only way. He studied the ceiling. A maintenance panel sat directly above the guards. He climbed a support frame quietly and pried it open. The space was cramped, filled with pipes and cables. He crawled above the guards, positioned carefully, and dropped. He landed between them. His shock blade flashed once. Then again. Both mercenaries collapsed before they could shout. Rian stepped over their bodies and palmed the door panel. It slid open, revealing the bridge. Korthak stood at the center, gazing at a holographic map showing the Terran convoy's approach path. He didn't turn immediately. His voice rumbled through the chamber. I knew you would come. He turned slowly, eyes burning with layered fury. Humans never run from vengeance. That is why you are so easy to crush. Rian lifted his blade. You talk too much. Korthak smiled, an expression filled with cruelty, not humor. And you are alone on my ship. Rian glanced once at the disruptor sync icon glowing on his wristband. Not for long. Alarms blared. The countdown had begun. Red emergency lights flashed across the Bloodgaze bridge as sirens wailed through the corridors. The disruptor charges synchronized on Rian's wristband, forming a pulsing ring of warning icons. Each one counted down with a cold precision that contrasted sharply with the chaos erupting around him. Korthak's claws scraped across the metal deck as he advanced, the floor vibrating with every step. You sabotage my ship, he growled. You strike my warriors. You insult my honor. Tell me, human, do you truly believe you'll leave this vessel alive? Rian steadied his blade. I only need to leave before your power grid collapses. Korthak released a deep, rumbling laugh. Then your odds are hopeless. He lunged, covering the distance in a blink. His strike sliced through the holographic map, scattering fragments of blue light. Rian shifted his weight and dodged, rolling beneath the swing, feeling the draft of displaced air scrape across his neck. Korthak spun, claws raking the deck where Rian had been. The bridge trembled. Crimson veins across the walls flickered. The disruptors were already working. Korthak roared, You dare cripple a Resactor warship? Rian rose to his feet. You forced my hand the moment you targeted civilians. That answer struck a nerve. Korthak charged again, faster this time. Rian sidestepped, caught the alien's arm, and redirected the momentum. The mercenary slammed into a console, smashing it in a burst of sparks. Rian backed toward the command dais, keeping a clear view of the exits. Every part of him screamed to keep moving. He wasn't fighting only Korthak, he fought time, systems, failing lights, and a ship that would soon become inert metal drifting in vacuum. Korthak rose slowly, shaking debris from his armor. I underestimated you. That mistake ends now. Rian didn't speak. He observed openings, counted breaths, memorized patterns in the alien's footwork. Korthak pushed forward again, this time feinting a strike. Rian blocked the real attack with his blade, sparks jumping between metal and carapace. The force behind it pushed him backward. Rian's boots slid across the floor. He twisted his wrist and drove the blade's edge along a gap in the armor. Korthak hissed in pain. A dark fluid oozed from the wound, sizzling when it hit the deck. You fight like a trained soldier, the alien snarled. Which faction owns you? None, Rian replied. I walked away. Korthak's eyes flared. Then walk away from this. He slammed his forehead into Rian's temple. The impact rattled Rian's vision, sending a sharp buzz through his skull. He stumbled, clutching the side rail to steady himself. Korthak didn't relent. He swept a leg, knocking Rian off balance. Rian hit the ground hard. Korthak lifted his boot to crush him. Rian rolled aside a split second before the boot cratered the floor plating. He forced himself upright and sprinted toward the central column. Korthak followed, ripping a support bar from the wall. The jagged metal piece became a makeshift weapon. Rian braced himself. Korthak swung. Rian ducked. The bar smashed into a control node, sending shards flying. The bridge shook again as another disruptor activated somewhere deep in the vessel. Below the hum, Rian heard something new, the engine core destabilizing. The vibrations carried a warning rhythm he recognized from past battlefields. The ship had minutes before power dropped completely. He needed to finish this now. Korthak swung again. Rian caught the bar with both hands. The impact numbed his arms, but he held on. He twisted his hips, using Korthak's own strength to redirect the strike. The bar jammed into an exposed conduit, jarring Korthak forward. Rian seized the moment. He drove his shock blade into the gap under Korthak's right arm, sliding between armor plates. The alien staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he pushed forward, forcing Rian back until the blade nearly slipped from his grasp. Humans, Korthak growled through clenched teeth. Always clinging to hope. Rian tightened his grip. Someone has to. He yanked the blade free, sidestepped, and struck again, this time slicing a cable above him. Sparks cascaded. Korthak shielded his eyes, and Rian used the distraction to land a hard kick to the alien's knee. The joint buckled. Korthak dropped to one side. Rian didn't wait. He charged, shoulder-checking the war leader into the command pillar. The alien's head snapped back. The impact echoed across the bridge. Korthak collapsed to one knee, struggling to rise. Rian held the blade at his throat. Call off your attack. Korthak laughed, blood dripping down his jaw. You've already stopped it. Rian hesitated. What? You think disabling this ship ends my plan? Korthak snarled. Others wait beyond this orbit. Your convoy will burn regardless. Rian's pulse spiked, but he steadied himself. Not if they never receive your signal. And you will prevent that alone. Korthak scoffed. You're just one man. Rian met his gaze. One man is enough today. He slammed his fist against the disruptor activation key on his wristband. A blinding surge of blue-white energy rippled through the ship. The entire bridge jolted. Every console flickered and died. Engines roared once, then choked into silence. The vessel drifted as if stunned. Korthak's eyes widened in disbelief. You destroyed my command. Rian stepped back as emergency shutters slammed across the windows, sealing off the bridge. Korthak rose again, staggering. You will not leave this ship. I swear it. Maybe not, Rian said. But neither will you. He activated the bridge lockout controls. Korthak rushed him in a final burst of rage, but the failing gravity generators flared. The floor lurched. Both men lifted off their feet. Rian caught a railing. Korthak floated uncontrolled toward the far bulkhead. Rian kicked off the rail and propelled himself toward the exit. He hit the door panel as the ship drifted into blackout. The door slid open. He pushed himself through and sealed it behind him just as Korthak slammed into the glass partition, roaring in fury. Rian didn't look back. He moved through the dark corridor, guided by emergency strips glowing faint blue. Prison cell locks clicked open behind thin walls. The prisoners would escape soon. He reached the maintenance hatch he'd entered earlier. With one hard twist, it opened. He dropped into the conduit and slid downward until he hit the docking pipeline. The station's gravity returned as he exited the hatch. Docking alarms blared. The walkway trembled, but Rian sprinted without slowing. In the bay below, the bloodgaze remained dark, motionless, powerless, defeated. Rian vaulted behind a cargo crate as security officers rushed in, shouting about a disabled warship. He let the noise fade behind him as he navigated the maze of transit tunnels. He slipped into a small crowd of workers heading toward the lower rings. No one noticed him. No one stopped him. When he finally reached an empty balcony overlooking the station's inner ring, he paused. Ships glimmered through the transparent glass. Somewhere out there, the Terran convoy flew alive because he'd intervened. He exhaled. A quiet victory. No applause. No recognition. He preferred it that way. As he turned toward the shadows, voices drifted from a group of alien dockhands down the hall. Did you hear? A single human crippled a Razakta warship. No one knows his name. He stood up to Korthak. Rian pulled his hood low. People talk too much, he muttered. He walked away before the story reached him again, just another rumor traveling the outer reef. A small smile touched his lips. Humans were underestimated. But not for long. If you want a full compiled PDF, art prompts, voiceover script, or next HFY story, just tell me.